Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball with me, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe. Most of us are still naturally focused on COVID-19, but I believe that historians will remember 2021 as the year when the world community finally became serious about dealing with climate change. The US envoy for climate change, John Kerry, was recently in China and sealed an agreement with the Chinese. Who would have thought that that would be possible, that the two major powers would cooperate on carbon reductions? Last week, President Biden hosted the World Earth Summit with over 40 nations, and President Xi and President Putin both delivered speeches. This makes me think that where we are all in the same boat, like on climate change or dealing with the pandemic, there is still a chance for effective multilateral cooperation. It's great that the US is leading again, not just because it's the second largest emitter, but because where the US leads, other countries feel a kind of obligation to behave better. For example, during the Obama years, China reduced the number of coal-fired power stations. After Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement, China built 1,000 coal-fired power stations. At the summit last week, a number of countries made very ambitious commitments to reduce their carbon emissions by 50%, 60%, 70% by 2030, and to decarbonize their economies entirely by mid-century. This is good because since Paris in 2015, we haven't really moved forward. The last major climate conferences at Katowice in Poland or Madrid in Spain didn't really produce any great results. So many climate experts are now seeing COP26 in Glasgow this autumn as really the last chance saloon to keep to the Paris target of 1.5 degrees of global warming over pre-industrial levels. Anything above that means that we're going to have lasting and even irremediable adverse circumstances. Now, I don't particularly share the more pessimistic, gloomy scenarios of groups like Extinction Rebellion, because if their scenarios are true, we would have to adopt very risky geoengineering techniques to reduce global warming, and we would probably have to change our whole mode of governance and whole mode of society. I still believe that with technology and good policy, there is a chance that the Paris goal of 1.5% of global warming can be met. But we also see the consequences of tardy or insufficient action. Just last week, the World Meteorological Organization of the United States published United Nations, published a report which again shows that we are dealing now with 3 times more extreme weather events. Vis-a-vis 30 years ago, 25% of the population lack access to drinking water, and 4 billion people are going without food for at least 1 month of the year. So what does Glasgow have to do to really turn the situation around? I think there are 4 things. In the first place, it's very good that we are now seeing these more ambitious nationally determined contributions, but we need a verification and assessment mechanism to make sure that countries are really sticking to these targets and to hold their feet to the fire. The head of the UK MI6 intelligence service last week usefully sort of suggested that because climate change is now a security issue, the intelligence services should play a role in verifying that countries are keeping to those targets. This may be a good or not a good idea, but we need an assessment mechanism. Number 2, we need to give more assistance to the developing countries to help them with the green transition. The Indian Environment Minister has pleaded for a carbon space, arguing that developing countries, because they have not caused global warming initially, should not pay the price. And therefore they should be allowed to continue to use carbon long after the old industrial countries have stopped doing so. But this is not a solution. The only solution is to make sure that these countries receive proper funding to make that transition. The UN Environment Programme has suggested that they're going to need between 140 and 300 billion dollars over the next 30 years to be able to do this. In the third place, we need to make sure that as we come out of the COVID pandemic and build back better, that we effectively transition to the green economy so that we don't lapse back into using carbon fuels later on. President Biden, with his infrastructure program of $2 trillion, the EU with its EU Next Generation program, are pointing in the right direction by insisting that 40% of the grants and loans should be used for the green transition. It's important that this is seen to create jobs, so that Republicans in the United States, who often believe that climate change transition is going to take away old jobs in the oil and gas industries, see that many more new jobs are being created in the new green sectors and technologies. The US banking and private industry sector is pointing the way by now approving trillions of project loans and development funds to those green technologies. That is a good sign. Finally, in full position, we need to put the security implications of climate change onto the COP agenda, where it has unfortunately largely been absent up until now. Even with 1.5 to 2% warming, we're still going to see a lot of security implications in terms of rising sea levels, in terms of migration, in terms of conflicts generated by disputes over scarce resources. The military community is now onto this and can offer a lot in terms of humanitarian response and helping us to better forecast how much climate change is going to impact. In the past, there's been a reluctance at COP meetings to discuss security because there's a sense that it could take some of the impetus away from the reduction and mitigation. But the two aspects are now equally important, and both should be reflected on the Glasgow agenda. So we may be in the last chance saloon, but last chance means that there is a chance, and it's even more important that we do not squander it. Thank you for watching and listening today. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye for now.